There is one change that is absolutely massive. See if you can guess which change it is as I go over the new patch notes that have been put down in the PTR. So it's not live yet, but it could be. So the following changes to the game servers have been applied to both live and PTR servers. Custom game lobby advertisements now properly time out 15 minutes after. This timer resets every time a player joins or leaves. Fix an issue with some players with classic keys. We're having licensing problems, so that one's an issue because of the new players on Game Pass not even able to play properly. And probably people outside of Game Pass as well, let's face it. Fix an issue where custom game invites were not working properly. And now we have visuals. Replace the main menu and campaign WebM backgrounds. So those are kind of like the video files that looked kind of scuffed, shady, dark, sinewy. And now you have the .mdl renders, which should be much more akin to the real thing, if not the real thing, as far as I understand it. So it should look a lot more legit. So when you played the original Warcraft 3, those orc or human or undead backgrounds with the character looking at you during the campaign screen, that should look a lot more authentic. Fixed certain VFX appearing as white squares in classic HD mode. I don't think I've come across that. Tree idle animation now enabled in Reforged environment. That's not a big change. You might thought it could be, but it's not. Fixed a few models which were not correctly being included with the game. Okay, that's fine. And there's an audio. Fixed an issue where music would overlap with music from a saved game. I feel like they mentioned this in the previous patch note that they did, but hey-ho. Unless that's talking about the one where you load. It is, right? Fix an issue where music would overlap with music from a saved game. Where music would overlap from music. I hope that is fixed, but I'm not 100% sure. I might have to test it. That if it works, we'll find out. World Editor added a new ability. This ability prevents bouncing missile attacks from bouncing to and from structures. The implementation of this ability is not fully complete and will be improved before release. Bouncing missile attack. Was that to stop Huntress Glaive from bouncing onto Serpent Wards? I wonder if that is specifically the issue, because otherwise you've got a new ability that's potentially being worked on, but that's less likely because this is following a patch where Serpent Wards and Sentry Wards were getting hit by a cleave and splash, and maybe some of it's intended, but other bits might not be, such as the bouncing missile attacks, so we'll find out. Hotkeys. Mouse buttons are now bindable while changing hotkeys when in a game. Removed hotkeys for passive abilities. So hotkeys for learning passive abilities still exist, but they removed it for specific ones. But the team is aware of an issue with resistant skin and hardened skin hotkeys still appearing. So that's nice. I like it that they let you know that they're aware of an issue, rather than you just saying, well, I guess the issue's still there, but is it being worked on? That's good. Just that simple bit of communication goes a long way. You can look at that and think, fine, I'm not going to worry about it, or, you know, not going to stress about it. This particular issue, not stressing about it, but I just like the fact that they put the team as aware. Unlinked peasant and military hotkey conflict detection. And, well, probably Soul 8 Man is responsible for many of these changes, because he's highlighted a lot of those. Fixed an issue. Yeah, thank you, Soul 8 Man, for that. Fix an issue with players unable to drag scroll. Yeah, that was one as well. As a result of this fix, scroll click is now not bindable. So you can't use the middle mouse button then, I guess, in that regard. So that was the thing that was causing the issue, maybe? Okay. I don't use my middle mouse button really for much, to be honest, so that's not going to affect me, but maybe it hurts other people. Fixed implementation of the toggle health bar hotkeys. So you can now just toggle it on and off during the game rather than go to menu. That's good. Updated help menu to show control group hotkeys. That's good. We like to be able to see things. Change the ordering of mercenaries so that it is possible to assign QWER to every camp without conflict. Okay. Wait, they changed the ordering of mercenaries. Is that all of them? I wonder how they did that, but either way, that's good. Less conflict. Better player, better, happier player. Removed Pocket Factory from the list of neutral buildings. I guess it just didn't need to be there. Remove select unit ability from the tavern. Okay. Maybe there's more heroes to come then, if that was taking up space. I'm not sure why that's necessarily removed, but hey. Fixed an issue where hero select and inventory keys were not detecting conflicts. Good, good, good. Added Never Dragon Roost to neutral buildings. That'll make Soul 8 Man very happy. Multiplayer. MMR gains and losses are now doubled, so your results are going to be more impactful. And perhaps this means that it will take less time or more time, depending on whether you're going to win streak or a less loss streak, as to how well you're going to be doing on the ladder. There are extra notes in the master change list explaining the MMR changes. General. Piercing damage against heavy armor decreased from 100% to 90%. That is the huge change. This has not occurred since the inception of TFT, as far as I understand it. The percentage damages may have changed in the early days. I'm not 100% sure, but generally speaking, it's been pretty consistent. One long line that goes straight along. Now, piercing damage will do 10% less damage to heavy armor. Heavy armor is units like grunts, Taurens, Abominations, Knights. You see quite a few of these units being used in multiplayer, and now they're going to take 10% less damage against ranged. This is generally massive. But I'm going to see what other people say about it too, but my initial thoughts are, I think you could go ahead with this. I'm sure people will say there's some reason that you can't. But the reason why I do say that is because we all know that mass ranged is king in Warcraft 3. Now, personally, I like that. If they keep this change or don't keep this change, either way, I'm interested. Mass in one unit, mass headhunters, mass riflemen, and then just controlling the micro aspect of them. Nice and easy for me. But generally speaking, the game should probably reward someone that actually puts a bit more effort in, aka someone that mixes in a couple of grunts with 4 to 5 headhunters rather than just having 9 headhunters. They've now got a couple of grunts, and some of those headhunters are removed. The grunts, what they'll do typically in a battle is maybe absorb some of those headhunter hits. The player has to try to ignore the grunts, but it's easier said than done with positioning and range, so the grunts are probably going to absorb some of that. So there's 10% less damage taken on a unit that is already designed to probably be a bit more tankier, but initially isn't, because mass range is just so easily to manipulate versus melee units that are clunky to get into position. So this basically gives melee units more power on the board. They got more tankiness. They can control the range units a little bit better, absorb, mitigate some of that damage. So that's the principle of what they're going for, in my opinion. Obviously, this gets more impactful if you take into account high damage upgrades. So if you had 3-0 on mass range units and a multitude of range units, that 10% is going to hit you quite hard. But if it's just 1 or 2 units, you probably wouldn't notice it all that much. So it kind of deals with mass, is what I'm thinking. So mass riflemen, that sort of thing. It could be almost a nerf somewhat indirectly to that. So, for example, I have 2 Warcraft 3s up. Now, this is the PTR. This is an old version of my map. Actually, no, this is the PTR, because this is the old version of my map. So, let's say, for example, on the current version of the game, we have 1 headhunter versus 1 grunt. We'll hit him 3 times, let's say. 1, 2, 3. And you can see 631 health. So if we go to the current version of the PTR and do the same. 1, 2, 3, 637 health. So doesn't seem like much. 637 health, 631. That's saved 6 health from 1 headhunter hitting you 3 times. So it's almost like 2 health. You've now got effectively 2 more health every single time you get hit by a headhunter. You can almost think of it that way than you would have done beforehand. Sounds small. It is small. And maybe that's why this change shouldn't be so much of a panic for people. But we'll find out what they think as we go through. So let's have a look at an impact of, say, 3 headhunters versus 1 grunt. So, 3 headhunters. We're going to 5 times now for a bit more impact. So 1, 2. Don't know why this guy's out of sync. 3, 4, 5. It's 3, 5, 1 health. Now let's come back to here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So he's got 3, 8, 6 health. So then you start to notice a bigger difference, right? Can you see that when I do that? I'm not sure if you can see that because I only got 2 monitors. Right, 3, 5, 1 versus 3, 8, 6. That's with 0 damage upgrades and just add in a couple of extra headhunters and an extra couple of hits. And now the grunt saved himself about 35 health. That's not too bad. Really isn't. You can see, can you? Okay. Well, I play it safe anyway. So little things like this can stack up and can be very important between whether a unit dies or not. And that's why range is such a good, strong unit. Range units in general. Because they're good at getting those last hits. Melee, a little bit harder to do it unless you're Orc and you've got Ensnare with Raiders that can lock a unit down. So this is why you typically see mostly range units, because they're good at getting those extra bits of units that you wouldn't normally get to kill otherwise, which is a little bit more experience for your hero, and your hero is really the strong power in the game. So yes, what we could do is, just for argument's sake, now that we've got this going, come back to here, beep bop bop, go to here. Now get the upgrades on the Headhunter. 1, 2, 3. Yep. And I'll go do the same on the other one. Come here. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this is the PTR, so we'll go back to the live version currently, how it is. You got 3 headhunters, 26 to 42 damage. And we'll do 5 attacks again, for example, actually, because you can remember that. 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, 2, 1 now. That's a pretty big drop just from those damage upgrades. Okay, now we go to the PTR. Where are you, PTR? You here? Okay. I've got to make sure that's properly paused. Yep. 2, 2, 1. Fully upgraded. 1. Look at the sync on this. Why is this so chank? I have no idea. 3, 4, 5. And that's 276. So 276 to 221. Now you're looking at about 54 health. And it starts to stack up. Do you see what I mean? And bear in mind, this is just only a few headhunters. Just a few. Typically, you're going to have, even in the early game, you're going to have quite a few of them, like 5 to 6. And then when you get to later game, they're going to be Troll Berserkers, so they're going to be even stronger. Do you know what I mean? And the same thing with Riflemen. You can easily get a full group of Riflemen, or 9 to 10 rifles, once the game gets to the mid-spot point. And they pack a punch, rifles do, once they're massed. So it might not seem like much, but it's a pretty big change. And what I like is that it might change the dynamic a little bit, because it's too obvious and it's too easy to just mass range units. I kind of like doing it, but I'm not saying it's a good thing. It's just because I'm lazy. But generally speaking, you guys need to let me know what you think. Do you agree with this change? Do you think it needs to be implemented? Do you think not? Perhaps different changes to how heavy armor is. Maybe it shouldn't be reduced. Piercing damage. Maybe piercing damage should reduce on other types of armor instead of heavy armor. Will it impact custom games? I suspect it should do if the custom games are using the default melee patch, which they probably will be. So it can have an impact on that. That's why this is such a big change, is because it's not just a specific change to a specific unit doing 2 less damage or attacks 0.5 faster. This is a fundamental game mechanic. The damage between weapon type and armor type. Damage done, damage received. It's been consistent forever, basically. Well, to be honest, there was drastic changes between Reign of Chaos and TFT. Like, the game changed completely. If you want to go like down that road, that is a completely different game, Reign of Chaos. The armor types, etc. And how useful units were. But TFT's been out quite a long time now. So, yes. We'll go through this, the rest of the patch. There's still more changes, and then we'll look and see what others have said. Fix the crash that occurred when selecting a structure that had its construction or production paused. Yeah, that one was funny. Good. Nice, easy fix. Huntress Glaze will no longer bounce to and from structures. That's a really strange one. Huntress Glaives will no longer bounce to and from structures. That's why they were putting that change in. It wasn't to do with the Serpent Walls, it was to do with buildings. It's kind of a big nerf to Huntresses, to be honest. And I'm not sure it's necessary. I mean, if you go Huntresses, you are kind of going a little bit all in. They're a pretty easy unit to counter, especially if the opponent's teching up. They could go air units or spellcasters are pretty good against Huntresses for slowing them down and stuff, etc. They do start to fall off, so you do need to all in. And when I say all in, you want to basically try to do some damage to your opponent's buildings, because the buildings are what keeps them alive, such as their food supply. For example, there might be a barracks, and behind this barracks there might be a burrow, and this burrow is constantly attacking those Huntresses. So those attacks onto the barracks from those Huntresses bounces onto the burrow. So you're taking damage from the burrow, but knowing that you're doing damage to that burrow because you're hitting the barracks. The pressure's there. Now, if that doesn't bounce onto the burrow, it's kind of easy to deal with those Huntresses from an orc perspective. And the same goes for other buildings, like humans might have 2 farms that block the way to their base. Now, if the Huntresses attack the first farm, they're only doing damage to one, not both. So time's ticking, the human's coming back to his base. The Huntresses want to get in there and get access to those militia or peasants. This is kind of bad nerf for the Huntresses. I don't know if this one will definitely stick around. I'm not a fan of Night Elf, but I don't know they need to nerf it this way. You could always perhaps change it so the bounce doesn't do so much damage to structures, like 25% damage or whatever it might be, instead of 50%. I have no idea, but I don't know if I agree with that. Undead. Animate dead units will now inherit upgrades they had when they were killed. So this one was funny. For example, if you had like a mercenary unit, like a Macrora, the ones that can spawn more crusty lobsters or entangle, if you resurrect that, it has those abilities. So they have the abilities that they would normally be able to use when they were alive. I'm not sure if the other fix happened that Soul 8 Man came across, where if you, for example, animated dead 6 archers and then brought 6 hippogriffs as an undead player somehow, but let's just say you were able to do that, you then put the archers on the hippogriffs to make them hippogriff riders, and then they become permanent units. They're no longer timed summons. And you've got yourself 6 bonus units for free. It's such a niche thing that probably won't get fixed necessarily, but I think they could fix it because it's not really intended. But then again, it's always cool to have stuff that's not necessarily intended be doable if it's very hard to do, which is something I've very much enjoyed from Warcraft 3 in the past, which is why I find it annoying when they nerf the fun things. For example, I lost Twisted Meadows, one of my favorite things to do, depending on the position of the opponent, because it could only be done in 2 spots, maybe 3 of them, I can't quite remember specifically, but there was a dragon in the corner gold mine spots that you could only access through a Zeppelin, unless you had an air unit, like a gargoyle or a hippogriff. So what you would do, or a wyvern, sorry, because it's orc and undead that could do this, you'd either use the gargoyle or the wyvern to pull the dragon into your opponent's base, this big level 10 dragon, and then you'd use a raider, if you're orc, to ensnare it, or an undead fiend to web it. And then once it had been webbed, ensnared, it reset its position. So now it thinks the base is where it's supposed to be, and it starts attacking everything by default. I loved that. That was my favorite thing to do. I looked forward to getting Twisted Meadows because that was... I don't care if I win or lost the game. I just wanted to try to do that. Because it's not easy to do. You're dedicating yourself to that one specific thing and that one specific time, and if it doesn't quite work, and even then, if your opponent's actually good, it's kind of an advantage to them, right? Versus a weaker player, they panic. Versus a good player, they go, oh, there's a level 10 dragon in my base. Cool. I'll kill that and I'll get the item. So that's the difference. These things need to be sort of kept in the game if they're a little busted, but they're hard to do because it's kind of fun. That's my opinion. The team is aware of an issue where passive abilities are not being transferred upon reanimation, and this will be fixed. Okie dokie. Neutral. Brewmaster Breath of Fire damage over time is drastically increased. 7 to 10, 14 to 15, 21 to 25. I still don't use it, but maybe now I might end up using it. Brewmaster movement speed moved from 290 to 320. This is fucking crazy. Hey, no. I already enjoy playing the panda, and now it's just going to be even more ridiculous. Because it's like, he's going to be moving as fast as a fucking demon hunter. That's kind of ridiculous. He's fast. I think this kind of makes the crit even better, to be honest, because he has a passive to do crit or dodge, which is the one I like to take, because I think Breath of Fire is better with that, because you can just cast Breath of Fire more times than rather use a chunk. I think if you want Drunken Haze to be used more, Drunken Haze needs to be like 50 mana or something like that. At the moment, I think it's like 75 mana at least. So you're blowing through like twice your mana when you do a Breath of Fire and a Drunken Haze. So that's why they're increasing the damage, to make it more worth doing in the first place. And it is a big spicy bit of damage. But if your opponent is able to heal that off initially with a healing scroll or something, you've lost a ton of your mana. That makes the fight go better for you in the long run if you just use Breath of Fire over time. Do you see what I'm saying? You picking up what I'm putting down? Plus the crit. The crit is fun. It stacks, obviously, better, like the Blademaster in the late game. And if the guy's moving quickly, he's going to land more hits and be more reliable to get those crits. He's going to be like a Blademaster, man. Fix an issue where the neutral variant of Brilliance Aura was not displaying. That's the change that everyone wants. All changes. Okay, I think this just goes back to everything that's combined from both patch notes. So I think we can leave it there and then take a look at the comments. So definitely some spicy stuff there. I'm going to skip past this because I'm pretty sure this is what we've already seen before, that I've covered before. Yeah. Targeting wards, and then the glaives will no longer bounce. So I thought that was to do with the wards, but actually no. Save Orcas. I've been noted about this post. He likes to tell Grubby what to do in his Twitch chat. Hello, Save Orcas. Piercing damage against heavy armor decreased from 100 to 90. This is a significant change, and I think there should be more discussions. I respect Neo's suggestion. Oh, it was Neo that was responsible, was it? To make it happen. Maybe he got sick of all the range units being used in these games. I wonder if that was it. But I respect his idea, but we need to talk about it more. However, let's take a closer look at melee units from different races and different matchups. Footman, strong unit, doesn't need a buff against piercing. Imagine Footman in the early game getting 10% less damage from archers, fiends, to buff. It is better to slightly buff defend. Their special ability that counters units with piercing damage. I think Footmen do technically kind of benefit the most from this change, but Footmen are still kind of shit. I don't think they're a strong unit. I think they're kind of a weak, disposable unit that everyone takes advantage of killing. Even if they have defend, I still hit them with my ranged units and my hero a few times, and I'll still kill that fecker. Defend is strong when it's strong, but generally speaking, it's kind of weak because it's such a heavy investment. They made it cheaper to make it, which is good, but they also nerfed it as a compensation for that, so it's not like a full just cheaper, but it's the same. And you don't really want to be with Footmen. Like, even Grubby said this. Like, once you go tier 2 or something, you never want to build another Footman again, basically. It's a unit that you want to stop building entirely. It's the reason why a lot of human players are doing the build where they basically transition to a blacksmith into rifles from the early-ish to mid-game point onwards. They build a few Footmen, maybe 5 tops, but not much more than that. So it's not like you ever see people going mass Footmen with mass defend. That might be a niche thing that happens, and it could definitely deal with people. And if it deals with people, it probably means it's a counter to them because they were probably straight teching in the first place, not building units. But generally speaking, I don't think Footmen... I mean, I'm going off on a diatribe here, but basically Footmen, yeah, they're hardly a big problem. I mean, I play ladder, I play random, I play against all the races as all the races. If I see a human opponent, it's generally a free win for me, most of the time. Militia, this unit was nerfed recently. If there is a need to buff them, simply revert the -1 armor. Oh yeah. I don't even know why they got the -1 armor, other than humans just being better at sort of efficiently using their militia to creep, which is kind of their thing. It's their gimmick. You let orcs have tier 2 fortified burrows. That used to be a tier 3 thing. You kind of gave them that, but militia just keep getting nerfed lately, just because that's the race's thing. Like, if you keep nerfing the fundamental thing that makes the race what it is, you may as well just play the other races. Again, I'm going off here, but what's the point of playing human if the militia are fucking shit? That's one of their big things, basically, being human. That's the catch. They're fast. They can attack. They can kill creeps and stuff like that. They can get you ahead a bit quicker, because if you don't get ahead, you're going to lose anyway as a human player. Knights. Knights are already a strong counter to fiends in human versus undead. In addition, they have an additional upgrade, Sundering Blades, to deal more damage, but that's been nerfed as well, hasn't it? So, again, it's like addressing units that have kind of already been nerfed. So, this is not that big a buff to them. With piercing damage, medium armor. Yeah, they're good. But undead have Orb of Corruption, and they can still focus knights down. So, yeah. Fiends are tier 1 units or tier 1.5 units. Knights are tier 3. So it's not quite a direct comparison. Although the reason why he's mentioning it is because Fiends are typically used in a late game undead army, because they are just solidly good. That's how good they are, is that they can stand up in the late game and be a complement to the undead Orb of Corruption Lich focus. Orc. Grunt. Strong unit, which I think the Grunt is the one that probably should receive the best from this, because it's... Again, like a lot of Orc players, they'll just go mass headhunters. In fact, they'll just straight tech to tier 3 now, or tier 2. That's actually quite common. They barely even bother to build the barracks, and if they do, they might get 1 grunt. And the ones that do build the barracks, intended to make units, they get headhunters. So they mass headhunters instead, and they'll go all in on tier 2, or still keep going headhunters towards tier 3, and complement it with Spirit Walkers, Kodos, and stuff like that. You don't often get to see the grunts too much. They're not bad units by any means. I actually do think they're very good units for what they are. But I think there are a lot of people that go headhunters because they just know that ranged is just king. So you can still go headhunters against grunts and get away with it. So this just helps grunts just do what they're supposed to do a bit better. Which recently got a 25 health buff from the Berserker Strength. Grunts are decent and used in human versus night elf matchups. They are not used much versus undead because they get countered by destroyers, not by fiends. Taurens, strong unit that now has magic resistance and doesn't need further buffs. I see quite a lot of orcs going for Taurens and stuff like that. I haven't ever felt like I've been completely devastated by Taurens though. So I don't know if Taurens are still in that place where they are like just mega OP now. I don't know, what's your experience? This does make Huntresses a bit better though, to be fair, because they can be changed to tier 2 heavy armor at the upgrade on tier 2. Delicate situation, especially with the new upgrade that changes the armor type. This change will make them even stronger, but then they're getting a nerf that makes it so they can't hit multiple buildings. So I don't know, that's to do with it. It's 1548 in the UK at the moment. Have you subscribed yet to twitch.tv/witty? This poor guy, this poor witty guy, is streaming every day, multiple hours, struggling at the moment. Bears. This unit is in a good spot and doesn't need a buff. Bears are used prevalently in every Night Elf matchup these days. Doesn't need a buff. I still think Bears... They'll be a little bit tanky during this. I'm thinking of the type of army compositions that you'll typically be using against Bears, such as the Undead with the Fiends and the Orb of Corruption. Focus with destroyers. Generally speaking, or humans with rifles and priests. I don't think it's too hard. I do think bears are kind of scary in a way, because sometimes they just completely dominate you, and then there's other times where it feels like they don't do anything. You have to have like a very specific number of them to actually have that impact, and this will help it be easier. I think bears do benefit probably the most out of most of these units, because they're very consistent with Night Elf armies. So it is strong for bears. So if it was too strong, then perhaps bears could get something specific that made them a little bit weaker. Undead. Ghouls. A unit that was nerfed for a few patches. Could be buffed. I mean, they're so squishy. It will be a buff against creeps as well. Bear that in mind. Creeps with piercing damage. Or you trying to creep as well. Using piercing damage against specific creatures. That's going to be a bit harder. Isn't it crazy that bears are in like every Night Elf army? Yeah, but it's kind of because Night Elf don't really have a huge variety of units. Fairy dragons aren't really supposed to be massed. Mountain giants are big, tanky, but clunky. Kind of, they're awesome units, but in a way you never sort of get them. You either get a load of them or you get none of them. So there's a couple of units you basically never get. Druids of the Talon, you're not going to see too many of those typically because you need a separate building for it. And then you got hippos, hippo riders. Again, kind of niche whenever you see that sort of stuff. So they really only have like the the archer dryads and the bears with some huntresses if you want to go down that. Abominations. They are fine in a good spot. If needed, they can be a personal buff to make them more fireable. Recent +2 damage actually helps. I think abominations are pretty good at being tanky. But you don't typically get so many of them that this is going to be a huge buff. You only get a couple of them just to absorb the hits. I think it helps the ghouls, but they are squishy, so it's not hard to kill ghouls, regardless of whether they get 10% less damage taken. In short, I have reservations about this change. I'd like to hear more opinions from pro players. In my personal opinion, I could be wrong. It's that melee units are countered a bit too much by the magic damage from certain units in general. The army composition of melee units, casters. Possible way to address this is to reduce the magic damage to heavy armor units from 200 to 175% and add +1 damage to all ground units. I more agree with that, to be honest. I do think magic damage does a lot of damage to heavy, to the point where it makes heavy units almost like you're shooting yourself in the foot if you build a unit that's got heavy armor, when your opponent's got like a fair few caster units. Even like the weak little caster units like Banshees or Sorks can still pump out a fair bit of damage, even though they've got a fixed amount of damage that's typically very low. They're doing 200% damage, so you know, shaman, witch doctors do fuck all damage typically, but you get enough of them and you hit a heavy armor target, it's actually quite good. But more likely spirit walkers, and those can pump some damage. So I think you could definitely make more of a change for that than you would make a change for the 100% to 90% on heavy armor. I agree that this is more likely that you would go ahead with the heavy armor change being less damage from magic first, then piercing. It's kind of more that piercing is just too fucking good. That's what it is. Piercing units are too good and stuff like that, but it's kind of the way the Warcraft 3 is designed, and people want to go fast, and the pace is more about sort of creeping hard and fast, getting high levels on your heroes, so you use range units to manipulate creeps, take less damage, pierce them down faster. So overall, it's an interesting change. Will it 100% go through? I think there's a good likelihood that it probably won't, because if there's any backlash whatsoever, there's a chance that they just won't commit to it. And I'm sure there's going to be some backlash, and we don't even know what the Asian crew think. Asian Bob and Asian Tim, what they're up to. I'm talking about like the pro players across the pond, because they have very different ideas on the balance of the game, and they'll typically get very upset about things that you might think is actually fine. Like Nurse of the Demon Hunter, they'll get like really upset and think the Demon Hunter's a weak hero or something. So I don't know what they're smoking, but they have their own opinions. So then you have to please them as well. It's not just like our audience that you typically know. It's big. Let me know what you think. I think they won't go ahead with it. I think the game won't change too much. I think it will change a fair bit, to be honest, if they do actually make that change, to be honest. Not massively. People are still going to mass range units, I'm pretty sure, because that's how good range units are. So then that might be an argument for this change to go through, because people might still mass range units, knowing that they're going to be doing 10% less damage to heavy armor units. Do you see what I'm saying? But I don't know. I don't think they would make a fundamental change like this. I think they were happy to make like the panda go faster, and even that's kind of crazy. That's kind of big by itself. That seems like big already. And then this other thing is like fundamentally changing the game. It changes the creeps. It changes you versus specific units. The pacing of the game, how fast you can go. Yeah, it could implement more different strategies. So perhaps that's one angle they're going, to try to get a different variety of units seen more than just mass range units. I mean, I'm sure Neo will do a post, and maybe I can react to it, because I haven't reacted to a Neo video in a while. Maybe he could do a video explaining why he thinks this change should go through, since I think he might be somewhat responsible for it, hearing from what I've seen on the forums. But hearing from what I've seen, that's an interesting way to say it. Anyway, I'll finish the video up here because I think I've gone on way too long. It's quite the ramble. But yes, have a good one.